Bienvenue à tous et merci de nous rejoindre pour cette nouvelle édition de l'interview. Aujourd'hui, je reçois Madame Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, ancienne ministre des Finances du Nigeria et coprésidente de la Commission mondiale sur l'économie et le climat. Bienvenue Madame. Merci d'avoir accepté notre invitation. Madame Okonjo-Iweala, l'Afrique est engagée dans un programme de développement, l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine, un programme qui prévoit notamment la transformation structurelle des économies africaines. C'est une nécessité pour le développement?
Absolutely. Africa is engaged in this Agenda 2063, which I think is tremendous because it also lines up with the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. And I think it's necessary for us to follow this strategy in order to transform the economies of Africa. One of the things that we are missing is diversification of our economies, which are very dependent on commodity exploitation and export. So the key issue is how does the continent undertake that type of structural transformation that will help us create industries, manufacturing jobs that are good for our young people, services, tourism, a new generation kind of jobs. Technology is key now, and our young people are using a lot of technology. 40% of them are on the internet. So how do we engage them? All these are the things we need to think through. How do we better trade within Africa? All these are components of structural transformation.
Tous les secteurs dont vous parlez, la infrastructure, tourisme, technologie, le financement est un défi pour le continent. Comment les États africains peuvent-ils davantage mobiliser de ressources financières?
I think in terms of the financial resources, there are two angles. The first is to recognize that the public sector cannot finance everything. And so we need to attract the private sector. And today, in this forum of the Economic Commission for Africa, we were talking about how do we attract private investment into energy. So we have PIMCO, one of the biggest fund managers in the world, controlling $2 trillion in assets, came here and they said they need to have a good regulatory environment, very conducive policies, some risk mitigation, which will enable them to invest. So when we look at those things, we put into place the environment that can attract the private sector from outside, but also our own domestic private sector within Africa. The good news is we are beginning to do that. Many of our countries are near the top of the doing business ranking of the World Bank, meaning that our policymakers and presidents are recognizing that we have to change. The second part of the equation is domestic resources. As a former finance minister, I can tell you that we have to also improve the mobilization of our own resources, better taxation, new forms of tax, better tax policy and administration to generate more resources to finance our own investment. So those, I think, are the two areas we need to work to get more financing.
Alors, vous parlez de ce secteur public qui ne peut pas tout financer, du secteur privé qui est sollicité. Beaucoup d'économistes plaident pour les partenariats publics-privés. Vous êtes du même avis?
I think so. I think that in order for us to develop on the continent, we really need this public-private partnership. This is the new way of governance for the future. This is the new wave. We even need to bring in civil society. And the reason is that no one party can carry out this development alone. So public-private, philanthropic sector, civil society, they all have to come in as partners to implement a more inclusive and diversified development for the African continent.
Alors, dans ce besoin de financement, de développement de l'Afrique, l'Afrique a aussi un important besoin d'infrastructures, des infrastructures essentielles à son développement et à son émergence. Comment financer ces infrastructures sans arriver à une situation de surendettement?
That is a very good question. How do we finance infrastructure without getting too indebted? Well, I think there are several innovative ways we can look at this financing, and we're already beginning to use some of them. We have a number of new instruments that we can think about in the energy sector, for instance. We've got governments like the South African government that are doing auctions for renewable energy and asking the private sector to come and bid, and they're getting very good prices, and the private sector is developing this. So that's one thing. We need to think of blended finance, where we merge both public sector resources and private resources, or we get the multilateral development institutions like the African Development Bank to blend resources with the private sector to finance these investments. So there are many sorts of ways. We've got on the continent sovereign wealth funds. We've got the Africa 50, which is an organization that also does investment and financing that can partner with the private sector to deliver. So really, we need to get creative. We need to get excited to find new ways of doing business on the continent.
Alors, on a parlé du financement. On va aussi parler des échanges entre pays africains. Le principal projet économique de l'Afrique est actuellement la zone de libre-échange continentale. La ZLECAf va entrer en vigueur de manière effective le 1er juillet 2020. Les États africains peuvent-ils s'attendre à des retombées économiques importantes?
I think the Continental Free Trade Agreement is one of the most interesting and even I can use the word revolutionary agreements that the African countries have entered into in this decade that we are coming in. With that agreement, we're going to have a much larger market. We're going to be able to trade much better among ourselves. If we adopt also technology and digital ways of managing our trade, it can create many more jobs for our young people and create more wealth. It can make for more inclusion in the way we develop. We are trading very little among ourselves, so we need to increase that. And as we trade among ourselves, we'll also find a way of cooperating so we can trade better with the outside world. So yes, I think that the free trade agreement is absolutely essential, revolutionary, and we can't wait to see it being actually implemented.
Alors vous parlez de retombées économiques positives importantes pour l'Afrique. Pourtant, certains pays ont été réticents à ratifier l'accord de la ZLECAf. À quoi sont dues ces réticences?
Well, you've got some large countries like my own, Nigeria was a bit reticent, South Africa maybe, but we should look at the reasons. I think the reticence should not be taken as something really negative. I think they're taking time to study how this free trade agreement will impact them, because some of them have the capability to manufacture and they want to make sure that the rules of origin are clear and are respected. So you don't have a situation where the free trade agreement is being exploited to bring goods in and then take them to other countries at zero tariff, meaning that the manufacturing and the industries in those countries will be affected. So you can imagine that those who have manufacturing industries in some countries like Nigeria with a very large population and a large market are concerned that everything is clear, so they are not disadvantaged. Once these rules of origin and other things are ironed out, I think you will see the countries coming in without, and there will be no more reticence.
Alors il y a un secteur particulièrement qui demande énormément de financement, où l'Afrique a un déficit, c'est le secteur des énergies. Comment financer les énergies renouvelables, notamment sur le continent?
Well, you know, we talked about this issue of financing of energy before. A lot is already going on. We heard the head of Africa 50, Alan Bobise, say that they're working on so many, new ways of financing renewable energy. You know, like the wind project of the Turkana project in Kenya has all been financed through private sector and public-private partnerships. We have other projects, the one in Morocco. I think we need to look creatively at new instruments. How do we find guarantees from governments, risk mitigation instruments from some of our multilateral agencies that can enable us to attract the private sector to finance these projects. Some of the projects need a lot of financing, and it cannot be either public sector alone or private. We must come together to raise the resources. We talked about auctions, you know, like the South Africa is doing. So for solar energy, they have been highly successful, and they've resulted in very low prices, like 4 cents per kilowatt hour for solar energy. We need to use that instrument as well.
Alors une dernière question, Madame la Ministre. L'agenda 2063, on l'a dit, le processus est en route. Est-ce que vous croyez à l'accomplissement des objectifs en 2063?
Absolutely. We don't really have a choice. I'm not going to say that everything will be accomplished perfectly, every objective. But look at the situation on the continent. We have a lot of young people. Africa will end up being the continent that has the largest population of young people. Right now, we have maybe 60% of our young people who are 35 and under. We have to create a lot of jobs. So we have no choice but to look at our strategy carefully and implement Agenda 2063 so we can deliver for the young.
Madame Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, vous êtes ancienne ministre des Finances du Nigeria et coprésidente de la Commission mondiale sur l'économie et le climat. Merci d'avoir répondu à nos questions.
Thank you very much.
Et merci à vous de nous avoir suivis. N'oubliez pas que vous pouvez retrouver cette émission et tous nos autres programmes sur www.africa24.com et à bientôt pour un nouveau rendez-vous de l'interview.